What's up, guys, and welcome to Work Wednesday. Today I'm going to talk about the controversial Klon serial number 001. It's not that controversial, actually. But actually, I'm going to talk about something very interesting that has to do with assets and where you put your money. And first, I'm going to start with the Klon 001. Since everyone's been doing a video on it, I figured I'd talk about it as well. And how it's probably not actually 001, meaning everyone says it's the first Klon ever made, and I guarantee it isn't. The first Klon ever made probably looks a lot more like this. Oof. I don't think you guys can see all that, but that was a lot of dust. I was going to blow it that way, but at the camera it just seemed wrong. Anyway, this is a breadboard, and even then, the first Klon probably didn't quite look like this. The first Klon ever made probably looked a lot different, and then evolved into something else. This right here happens to be the first Foxcatcher ever made. But even then, we had a prototype that was based off of JFETs, and it sounded horrible live. It was great in the shop when we plugged it in and played with it, but live it just didn't perform. But even then, when we found a sound we liked, we put it out as a PCB, and the first PCB didn't work. The second one didn't work, and eventually we get the revision C, which, if you look really carefully, over here, it says Rev C. And I know you probably can't make that out from where you're sitting, but you can see the layout, which looks nothing like the layout here, where all of these resistors are even, the 2 op amps are right there, and this happens to be what you get in a Foxcatcher nowadays, which is revision E. So it's changed a lot. There are about 50 or 60 with this revision, and then of course there was D, and then revision E. We have more revisions to make, and the thing is, depending on where you decide to make your serial number start, that can all change. That being said, the original Klon is probably sitting in Bill's house with Bill. The first Klon ever made is probably there with him. I have an early Foxcatcher that goes before serial number 1 on my board that gigs with me every night. So anyway, but what this is really all about is the investment side of that. Recently, the price of the Klon has gone way up. In fact, just in the last year, it's more than doubled. A lot of that has to do with people collecting items at home these days and holding on to their monetary value. You see that a lot with other things. Pokemon cards have gone through the roof. Cars are starting to go back up in price. Old ones, used ones. Ones that you could get, well, for example, this one. A year ago, I almost bought an E90 M3 for $15,000. It's gone up 10 grand in a year. It's just not worth it anymore. Well, actually it is, and I probably will end up still getting one. But my point is this. Things are going up because right now, for some reason, people are collecting. They're finding things more collectible, and maybe it has a lot to do with the fact that Bitcoin is becoming a new thing, and less things are tangible these days. Everything's on the internet, so people are trying to hold on to the things that are tangible. I'm not sure. I'm not a specialist in that. But just like collecting an old guitar is cool, and the vintage wave happened for the last decade and a half where everyone wanted 50s and 60s and 70s Strats, you've got this happening now with other things, you know, newer things. And I think that that's cool. I think right now, one of the big moves is things that happened in the 90s. For some reason, that nostalgia is huge. So the Klon, Pokemon, that M3 is actually 2000s, but you know, anyway. Ultimately, it all goes back to economics, and there is a limited supply of these things, so the price will always go up. If you look at the Tube Screamer, the original TS-808, it's gone up in price in the last year, and even before last year, it's not like it normally sold for $1,000. We're talking about a Tube Screamer. It's like $100 new. So for it now to be worth $1,000, it's really only worth that because supply and demand. There is no new supply of original TS-808s coming out because they don't make the original anymore. And if they started remaking the original, people would still want the original. Just like they started remaking the Klon, and people still want the original, and they're willing to pay $7,000 every day for it. It's just a matter of it doesn't exist anymore, and so people want it. So is it a bad investment to do these things at these prices? To kind of sum this all up, I don't think so. I think in the long run, it's like everything else, things go up. Will there probably be a market crash at some point where it comes down? Well, if you look at the TS-808, it came down just about a month and a half ago, but it's gonna go back up. Why? Because that's just how it is. Inflation happens, the dollar becomes worth less, and so it costs more dollars to get something. And generally, if there are less of a thing, then it becomes worth more. And so these are better investments, because if you just invest in holding money in a savings account, that money becomes worth less and less and less. So your $10,000 turns into $9,000, and then $8,000, and then $7,000. Even though it still says $10,000, its worth goes down. Whereas these things, their worth goes up because there's a limited supply. There can never be more made. We can always make more dollars, which is why inflation happens and the dollar is worth less. But we can't make more tube screamers from 1970 or the 70s. There's a finite amount. But I think now the way to sum up this video and end it is, do I think you should do that, or I should do that? Well, I do, and I have. I always do. Watches are the same thing. For me, I like things that hold their value or go up in value. I tend to try to buy at the bottom of the market, meaning I try to buy something so that it can grow in price. I usually never buy an amp that is sold at full price. I usually always buy it used, or sometimes get an industry discount because I own a pedal company. Perks. But I think that that is the move that you should always try and do. Always try and get a good deal on something that's going to go up in value. That being said, if you really want something, go ahead and buy it. Just understand that you're going to lose 10 to 20%. And maybe if you want that to grow, you got to hold on to it for a really long time. So that's it, folks. That's your Work Wednesday. Investing is a really hard one because everybody's different and everyone is comfortable with different levels of investment. Basically, me personally, would I ever buy a Klon no matter what the price? No, I don't really love the sound of the pedal. It's not my style. That being said, I appreciate what it is. I've met Bill before. We've had a conversation. We had a great back and forth about originality of circuits, which you can see in this video here. But I personally, I could build myself a Klon. The circuit's out on the market now. Like you can create it yourself. I don't necessarily see the value in buying one. That being said, do I think other people are crazy for buying them? No. In fact, just like I like collecting watches that a lot of people say is a waste of money, just because they don't personally feel like they feel comfortable investing $10,000 in a watch, that doesn't mean that they're right, it's a waste of money. It's just for them a waste of money because they don't see the justification in putting $10,000 into that watch. But they feel fine putting $10,000 into a Klon, and that's cool. That's their collector's item. And that's your Work Wednesday. Next week, I'm going to kind of do a recap on the PPP program, talk a little bit about how to get loan forgiveness, and should you do it the third time around? Yes, you should. So look forward to that next Wednesday. I will see you guys soon, and take care.